This is the Reviewing Network Live, a weekly stream of consciousness recording session where I sit back with you folks out there, talk about some of the big news stories from the past week, and some other things I found that might be of amusement to you out there. I think you might get a kick out of it. Now, these are more like audio podcasts and are much longer than my usual videos and are also, for the most part, unedited and will contain some foul language. So, if you're easily offended by that, I advise you to maybe step back a bit, maybe go somewhere else. But hey, if you're up to the challenge, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Thanks. And for the 119th time ever, we are live from the Reviewing Network studios. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Reviewing Network Live, the first one for the month of December 2025. And let's just say that it has been a very eventful week. Mostly it's been an eventful couple of days in terms of the biggest story taking place right now in Hollywood, and that is, of course, the main story that is so big and so important, and there's so many layers to it all that I had no choice but to make it the full focus of this episode overall. So we're going to talk about that story because there are so many layers, so many questions about what's going to happen now on this news story where, when it broke, there were literally people saying that this is the day the movies died. And they might be right, they might be wrong, but we'll touch on that as we go along here. But of course, before we do all of that, we of course have to go into the weekend box office in general, which was also in and of itself very eventful. You know, ordinarily, post-Thanksgiving weekend is not usually the best weekend to open a big blockbuster in general, but one studio basically said, fuck that logic, we're going to put this out there, and we're going to see how we do. And sure enough, paid out for him big time in a big way. We'll touch on that as we go along here, but let's take a look at the box office in general this weekend. Number 5 this week is Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which dropped to 2 spots from last week. $3.5 million this weekend, bringing its 4-week total to $55.3 million. Worldwide, it has grossed over $200 million. I don't get it. I'm not a fan of these movies, and I have no intentions on seeing this one. I don't understand the appeal of these films whatsoever, but then again, maybe I'm just a lonely one here. But number 4, another movie that I know nothing about, Jujutsu Kaisen Execution, which is another one of these, I'm guessing it's another one of these Crunchyroll type of films. It's an anime movie, and it says here on Box Office Mojo's page, a veil abruptly descends over the busy Shibuya area amidst the bustling Halloween crowds, trapping countless civilians inside. In the aftermath, 10 colonies across Japan are transformed into dens of curses. This is not a Crunchyroll film, though. This is a G-Kids release, and it brought in $10.1 million. Worldwide gross up to $40 million, and that's pretty much all I know about this movie overall, so can't really say too much more about that one. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to number 3 this weekend, which this took a little bit of bigger drop-off than I think a lot of us could have imagined. Wicked for Good, which dropped 73% from last weekend. And I get it. It's Thanksgiving week. It's post-Thanksgiving weekend. You're going to have a big drop-off, but 73% for a movie that was doing very well overall. This is actually, I think, a worse drop-off than the original Wicked did. But brought in $16.8 million this weekend, brought in $296.9 million after 3 weeks. Worldwide numbers is up to $440 million. Now, if you want a comparison to last year for Wicked, let's see where we at here. What was post-Thanksgiving for that? It's actually now, it's actually now lower than the original Wicked did. Wicked brought in $322.1 million after 3 weeks, and Wicked for Good is now under that at $296 million. So this thing could possibly not do as well as the original Wicked did now at this point, which is a shame because the movie was pretty good overall, and I thought it was moving at a pace where it could easily do that. But for some reason, there was this huge drop-off here. But then again, it could have something to do with the number 1 film this weekend and somebody pointing out a movie and saying that, hey, we don't care that this is the weekend where it's usually the dumping weekend. We're gonna put this out here, and we're gonna show everybody that we're dead serious. And funny enough, it was actually from the same people that put out Wicked for Good, Universal. But before we get to that, of course, we got to go to the number 2 movie this week, which is the number 1 film last week, and that is Zootopia 2. And Zootopia 2 brought in $43 million, dropping 57% from last weekend. 2 weeks into its run, it's up to $220.4 million after 2 weeks. It's closing in on $1 billion already, $915.7 million worldwide. If you want to compare this to the second weekend of the original Zootopia, which opened in March of 2016, it's definitely over that, $143.9 million. If this movie keeps up the pace, it could possibly crack the number one movie at the box office overall in the year. I mean, I would love it, so it can finally stop. So a Minecraft movie can finally be lowered down there for once. But I mean, this was a good movie. It was a good movie overall. So I would love to see that movie overtake a Minecraft movie easily. But let's get to the interesting one here. The number one movie this weekend, and that is, of course, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which sounded like a crazy idea to put a sequel to a big horror movie on the weekend after Thanksgiving. And it didn't help that this movie got some really bad negative word of mouth. The negative buzz on reviews from critics were overall not that great. Hey, the audience, and even the audiences overall, were not really that supportive of it. It got a B on CinemaScore, which is typical for a horror film like that. But, it only brought in a 26 out of 100 on Metacritic, 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, yeah, needless to say, it's not the best overall weekend. It's not the best reviews that this film could get. But, hey, this is a movie that literally is telling you critics be damned, because holy shit, man. $63 million for this movie. Now, granted, this is actually lower than the original Five Nights at Freddy's, which even that overperformed more than anyone expected it to. That one brought in over $80 million on its opening weekend. I mean, that one was one of those big surprises that put numbers that are very similar to Oppenheimer numbers and Black Widow, because Black Widow had the same type of numbers, but regardless, it was still surprising overall here with that movie doing as well as it did that first time around. And now you have the sequel here, $63 million. It's definitely lower, but considering that this movie only cost $36 to $51 million, I don't think Universal really is complaining all that much, especially Blumhouse. They're not complaining about this at all. They're just like, thank you for this fall, people. Because, yeah, they definitely needed this fall badly after the year they've had with one bad movie after another, The Wolfman, and then Megan 2.0, and then a couple movies that were actually kind of good, but didn't find an audience overall, like Drop, and then also The Woman in the Yard. But yeah, Black Phone 2 was a big success for them in October, and now Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a big success right now in December. And even if the film falls off the face of the earth and does the typical horror movie drop-off, which it should probably do, I mean, who knows? Maybe it might stick around in the number one spot next weekend, even though there's no big new releases coming out except for James L. Brooks' newest film, Ellie McKay. But then everyone's going to be waiting for the next weekend when you've got Avatar and also SpongeBob coming out, which should dominate the holiday box office overall. So either that or probably more than likely it's going to be Zootopia 2 back at the number one spot, unless it has a radical drop-off like last week. Is like Wicked for Good did this past weekend, which I don't think is going to happen, but you never know. I'm trying to see what else comes out next week as well, besides Ella McKay. It says here on Box Office Mojo it's a limited release, so maybe it won't get a big wide. So maybe there aren't any big wide releases. I think the only one that I see here is the remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night, which, considering that it's released by the same company that put out Terrorizer. And Terrorizer 3 was one of those big surprise successes that made it to number one last year. I wouldn't be surprised if that upset everybody. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be more than likely Zootopia 2, but you never know. This has been an interesting week at fall, to say the least, at the box office, and Hollywood really needed it. I mean, overall, it's been kind of a rough October, rough September, and then here come the holiday blockbusters, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger from there with Avatar and The Housemaid and SpongeBob and all these big Christmas titles coming out. So yeah, they'll take what they can get and then some. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into what is easily the biggest story of the week, and our main story that we're going to be focusing on all this episode. I was about to say all this week, but no, this isn't going to last all this week. But then again, with every new detail coming out, and the fact that this is going to take a while to actually get to the finish line, we could be talking about this for weeks now. But let's get to the biggest story of the week. So yeah, the biggest story that we've been following for the last couple months now is the future of Warner Brothers Discovery. And up until this early part of the week, it was looking more and more likely that Paramount was going to be the one that eventually was going to take it over, which would have sucked big time, and it looked like it was going to happen anyway because, Paramount pretty much has all the people behind Paramount pretty much have all the cards at this point. At least that's what we thought. But then Thursday morning happened, and you were starting to hear these rumblings that Paramount may have tried a little too hard, may have thought they had this in the bag so much that they decided to be cocky about it. And then by Thursday night, the news broke, and I had a little short that I put on this channel talking about this. But if you didn't hear, Netflix is officially buying Warner Brothers. They have won the bidding war for Warner Brothers Discovery, and the exclusive deal talks are officially going to get underway. Now, here's the full story from Deadline Hollywood, if you don't know what led up to this. It says here, Netflix has emerged victorious in what appears to be the highest and so far the winning bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, Deadline has learned, and will start exclusive talks to finalize a deal. This caps a tumultuous day that saw Paramount move aggressively to counter the giant streamer and seal a deal of its own for WBD. Netflix offered around $28 a share for Warner Brothers Discovery, according to sources mostly in cast. It's been a fast-moving auction and one that will reshape the entertainment landscape dramatically. WBD put itself on the block in October to open up the process after receiving 3 consecutive offers from Paramount. Warner has hoped to get a deal in place by mid to late December. Netflix would acquire the Warner Brothers Studios and HBO Max streaming assets. Paramount's offer was for all of WBD. Bloomberg is reporting that Netflix offered a $5 billion breakup fee if the deal fails to close. Comcast also bid for the streaming and studio and streaming businesses. But Comcast is still trying to get something from Warner Brothers. I'll touch on that in just a little bit here. But Paramount has argued that it was the only one of the 3 with a clear path to closing, insisting in a letter to WBD that the rival offers from Netflix and Comcast both present serious issues that no regulator will be able to ignore. It believes Netflix, being the dominant streamer in the U.S. and globally, would face major antitrust hurdles of adding HBO Max to the fold. David Ellison's company also called the sales process unfair and tilted towards Netflix. WBD countered that its board attends to its fiduciary obligations with the utmost care, and that they have fully and robustly complied with them and will continue to do so. In a veiled attack on WBD CEO David Zaslav, Paramount claims that sales processes have been tainted by management conflicts, including certain members of management's potential personal interest in post-transaction roles and compensation as a result of the economic incentives embedded in recent amendments to employee arrangements. Paramount has offered Zaslav a role in the companies if the companies were to merge. Zaslav's compensation agreement was recently restructured to take into account a sale of WBD versus the former separation of its businesses from its 2 public companies that was originally planned. Zaslav would have been CEO of a slimmed-down Warner Brothers, with WBD's current CFO Gunnar Wiedenfels running a standalone linear TV company called Discovery Global. It seems fair to say that a good deal of ill will has been brought up between the 2 camps. It's not clear what role Zaslav would play in a Warner-Netflix merger. Warner Brothers Discovery shares are up nearly 6% at $26 at very late trading, a 52-week high, and nearly 4 times a low for the year of $7.50. The shares have been sluggish pretty much since Discovery acquired Warner Media in April of 2022, but perked up dramatically of late when it emerged as a takeover target. All 3 buyers were offering a significant premium to the stock price pre-merger chatter. They were willing to pay for the elimination of a competitor, the acquisition of franchise control, and the synergy potential of integrating one of the most valuable content and IP libraries into the world into their platforms, wrote Bank of America analyst Jessica Reif-Ehrlich in a recent note. She calls Warner Brothers Studios with IPs from Harry Potter to DC to Game of Thrones a crown jewel. It's hard to overstate what a major pivot this deal would be for Netflix, which has made very few acquisitions in its history, preferring to grow organically. While Netflix is the clear streaming leader in subscribers, it still lags other media companies on deep IP libraries that could offer potential use cases for theme parks, experiences, Broadway shows, gaming, and merchandise. While Netflix has long maintained that M&A was a distraction and that the companies could build its own franchises more effectively than buying them, the landscape has shifted, Ehrlich said. Acquiring DC, Harry Potter, Hanna-Barbera, and Warner Brothers Discovery library properties would provide Netflix with a deep set of well-known IPs. Further, the acquisition would provide Netflix with physical production capacities and prestige that could help it to court talent at another level. As per WBD's original split plans, the Warner Brothers studio and streaming business consists of Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, DC Studios, HBO, HBO Max, as well as their film and TV libraries. Global networks, or the businesses that would likely not go to Netflix, include entertainment, sports, and news television brands, and channels globally including CNN, TNT Sports, Discovery Network, top free-to-air channels across Europe, the Discovery Plus streaming service, and Bleacher Report. Should the deal go through, Netflix would gain a global theatrical distribution apparatus, a massive library that includes titles from the DC Studios, Turner Entertainment, HBO, New Line, and the MGM pre-May 1986 catalog. Exhibition and the film community in general has been fearful of a Warner Brothers Netflix union. Netflix has reportedly said it will honor Warner Brothers' theatrical commitments in a merger, but the company led by co-CEOs Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters have repeatedly emphasized over the years that its focus is squarely on serving its streaming subscribers. Netflix is known to favor a 17-day exclusive theatrical window before movies arrive in their home, while the number one circuit AMC has been lobbying for a 45-day window. The two sides have been so far apart that the streamers' awards contenders this year, House of Dynamite, Wake Up Dead Man, Jay Kelly, and Frankenstein, did not receive any screenings in the top three circuits, AMC, Regal, and Cinemark. To date, Netflix's only movie to number one was K-pop Demon Hunters Sing-Along during the last weekend of August, which made $19 million over 2 days. All circuits played it except AMC. So that was the full story that broke on Thursday night. By Friday morning, Netflix and Warner Brothers had just made it official that yes, they are going to merge, and they had a deal in place. And here it is from Netflix's page itself, because it didn't say in that article how much this was actually going to be, but this was a press release they put out the following day. It says, today, Netflix, the company, and Warner Brothers Discovery, Inc. announced that they have entered a definitive agreement under which Netflix will acquire Warner Brothers, including its film and television studios, HBO Max, and HBO. The cash and stock transition is valued at $27.75 per WBD share, subjected to a collar as detailed below, with a total enterprise value of approximately $82.7 billion. Equity value of $72 billion. So they're putting out $82 billion to make this happen. That is insane. And, you know, the fact that Netflix really is committed to this, I mean, this is about as big of a gamble as you could possibly do here. But to continue on here, the transaction is expected to close after the previously announced separation of WBD's global network division, Discovery Global, into a new publicly traded company, which is now expected to be completed in Q3 2026. The acquisition brings together two pioneering entertainment businesses, combining Netflix's innovation, global reach, and best-in-class streaming services with Warner Brothers' century-long legacy of world-class storytelling. Beloved franchises such as shows and movies such as The Big Bang Theory, The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, The Wizard of Oz, and the DC Universe will join Netflix's extensive portfolio, including Wednesday, Money Heist, Bridgerton, Adolescence, and Extraction, creating an extraordinary entertainment offering for audiences worldwide. Our mission has always been to entertain the world, said Ted Sarandos, co-CEO of Netflix. By combining Warner Brothers' incredible library of stories and movies, from timeless classics like Casablanca and Citizen Kane, to modern favorites like Harry Potter and Friends, with our culture-defining titles like Stranger Things, K-pop, Demon Hunters, and Squid Game, we'll be able to do that even better. Together we can give audiences more of what they love and help define the next century of storytelling. Is there anything new here that was added? I don't think there is, but yeah. So this is officially happening right now, and I'm going to explain what right now because this thing has a lot of hurdles to get through. None more so than getting past Trump's basically Trump's what am I trying to say here? Basically Trump's cronies, if you will. So going back to Deadline Hollywood, the biggest question on everyone's mind is, how the hell is Warner Brothers and Netflix going to pull this off with a company, with the Trump administration and the Department of Justice, who, keep in mind, Paramount and David Ellis, the new owners of Paramount, Skydance, are very much in line with the Trump family, and they were willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that they got Warner Brothers. I mean, even after this deal was announced, they were talking about, oh, we're going to threaten it. We're going to threaten Netflix and Warner Brothers with everything that we have. We're going to make this deal done. It's just like, on the one hand, you kind of lost that battle, buddy. But let's talk about this. Going back to Deadline Hollywood, there was another article that came out after this that said, it says right here, Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos told investors on Friday that he was highly confident in the regulatory process and will win approval of the streaming giant's proposed purchase of Warner Brothers, but there are plenty hurdles ahead. First and foremost, given all the publicity surrounding the Warner Brothers Discovery auction, is the Donald Trump factor, and how his administration ultimately handles its review of the transaction. In the hours since it was announced, Trump has not yet weighed in, and the White House has said little. It declined comments on reports that David Ellison, CEO of rival bidder Paramount, met with administration officials on Wednesday, while there will also have been speculation that Netflix executives have also held confabs with administration figures. Unlike Paramount's bid for all of Warner Brothers Discovery, Netflix's proposal is to buy the Warner Brothers Film and TV studio, HBO and HBO Max. That will come after Warner Brothers Discovery completes its spin-off of other assets, including cable channels like CNN and Discovery, into a new entity. On the investor call, Sarandos said that the transaction would be pro-consumer, pro-innovation, pro-worker, pro-creator, it's pro-growth. That's pretty common language for any executive pitching regulatory prospects. New Street researchers Blair Levine wrote in a research note on Friday that the Trump Department of Justice is more than likely than not to challenge the deal. But there are steps that Netflix could take for what he calls the Trump transaction tax to boost its chances of getting the deal approved. Levin wrote that he would guess Netflix offered price guarantee to those subscribing to both Netflix and HBO Max could have a price cut. Netflix executives on Friday alluded to the possibility of a bundle of the two streaming services. Levine also suggested that Netflix would benefit from pledges to produce series in the United States, another issue that has been on the mind of the president. Netflix has been boosting its presence in D.C. in recent months with plans to take much higher profile storefront space for its lobbying and public policy offices, with designs for hosting screenings and other events. Sarandos has been a prominent donor mainly to Democrats, although he met with Trump for dinner at Mar-a-Lago before the president started his second term. Sarandos said that they didn't talk any shop, but the president mentioned that Melania and Barron were big fans of the streamer. Also pending is a response from Paramount and if and how they challenge the deal, such as making the case for all of Warner Brothers' Discovery directly to shareholders. Doug Kriesutz of TD Securities wrote in a research note that it is far from certain that the deal gets approved. Meanwhile, meaning that there still might be a possible path for Paramount. We definitely do not view the final chapter of this saga as having been written, he wrote. That Netflix emerged the winning bidder is itself a surprise, as many in Washington believe that Paramount had the inside track, in part because of an expected easier path to a regulatory green light in the Trump era. In that regard, there's little doubt that Paramount has forged stronger ties to the president himself, as evidenced by Trump's own words of his praise of its new owners, the Ellisons and the stories in the New York Post. Meanwhile, the president has a long history of attacking the other bidder, Comcast, and its CEO, Brian Roberts, while Netflix reportedly has been the topic of White House officials over antitrust concerns. Now, I want to go ahead and move ahead to today because this literally happened in the last couple of hours. There was an update about this where the President Trump actually did talk about Ted Sarandos and confirms the meeting that he had with them. Now, Sarandos said that he actually met with Trump in November about a potential merger deal, and this is how it went. This is how Deadline Hollywood put it. It said President Donald Trump gushed over Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos, calling him fantastic and more, but also noted that a combined Netflix-Warner Brothers would have a very big market share. That's for some economists to tell, and I'll be involved in that decision too, he told Deadline's Ted Johnson on the red carpet ahead of the Kennedy Center honors in Washington, D.C. tonight. He came up, he was in the Oval Office last week, I had a lot of respect for him, he is a great person. Ted has really done a legendary job. That's my horrible Trump impression, by the way, and now you know why I don't ever do it. He said the two had not discussed any potential guarantees in the case of a mega merger, which was ultimately unveiled on Friday. I think in the history of Hollywood, there really has been almost nothing like what he has done. That's a question that has a very big market share, and when they have Warner Brothers, their market share goes up a lot, and that could be a problem. The president's remarks tonight were the first of the merger since the Netflix emerged as the victor. Is there anything else in here in particular? Okay, they didn't say that. There's nothing else about here in particular, but okay, let's get to the nitty gritty on this whole thing. Of course, everybody in Hollywood is looking at this and saying that, yeah, this is not a good deal whatsoever. This is the thing that could literally kill Hollywood as we know it if this deal goes through. And yeah, and listen, I'll agree with that. I think there is definitely a lot of red flags here, but if we're being perfectly honest here, this isn't the worst possible option that they could have gone with here. I think most people could agree that of all the three options they had to work with here, the best one would have been to go to Comcast, because Warner Brothers and Universal already are kind of together on many different things, from the fact that Universal and Warner Brothers released for the same company on Blu-ray and physical media. Studio distribution services is a combo of Warner Brothers and Universal, and even then, Universal and Warner Brothers are still trying to work on deals together, but this time for the theme parks, which leads into the next thing I want to cover here. And that is that Warner Brothers is actually talking with Universal about licensing their DC heroes for attractions in the theme parks. This is from according to Bloomberg and KTLA5. More Universal attractions could soon be based on DC heroes such as Batman, Superman, and other DC characters. Currently, Warner Brothers licensed the DC intellectual property to Six Flags Entertainment with rides such as Batman the Ride, Justice League Battle for Metropolis, Lex Luthor Drop of Doom, and more. No contractual obligations have been drawn up and talks are in the very early stages, but that would allow Universal to replace or retheme its current Marvel attractions. If Universal replaces Marvel Superhero Island and has no Marvel Universe within the park, their contract with the now Disney-owned property would be terminated. They would no longer have the theme park rights to any Marvel property. I'm trying to see if I can find any more on this. But yeah, so even though Universal lost the Warner Brothers merging war, they still have a chance to team up on some other big things, including, getting these licensing rights for the superhero parks and all that. And hell, bringing in the Looney Tunes into Universal, which could be really, really fun to see. I thought there would be more to this, but yeah, it just goes to show you that Universal and Warner Brothers, in some way, shape, or form, will always be connected in any way, shape, or form. But with all that said, though, I tend to agree that, yes, this really does seem like a really bad thing. And a lot of people are saying out there that this is definitely a really bad thing, from the fact that, you've got the biggest thing that everyone's worried about is the future of the movies in general, especially with movie theaters, because as the article I just read said, Ted Sarandos, the co-CEO of Netflix, has been very much out there in the open, basically saying that, yeah, he does not like the theatrical experience. He wants movies to come out quickly, as soon as possible, and be available in the home. So essentially, moviegoers can watch the movies from the comfort of their own home, and you can't really do that when you're running a studio like this. I mean, you can't really go down that pathway for a big DC property overall. You can't do that for stuff like Superman or the new Supergirl movie, which apparently we're getting a trailer for that this week too, which will definitely be worth it. Like, for a studio like Warner Brothers, you can't expect to make money off your big Hollywood blockbusters if they're only in theaters for 2.5 weeks. I mean, that's not a feasible service in general here. And I think if Netflix is going to win the public over, or especially the Hollywood over, on this idea of buying Warner Brothers, they have to be open to keeping the theatrical process the way it is. Like, I agree with people. This is not that's one of the things that really has me worried about this whole thing, is that they're going to cut down on the theatrical releases, even though the theatrical window has already kind of been shut down quickly for Warner Brothers, because movies that usually wait about 3 to 4 months after they come out in theaters now have been reduced down to just 2 months now, because we have movies like Sinners, which was released in April and came out on Blu-ray in July, like late July. Like, we get that, but then sometimes you'll get something like, The Day the Earth Blew Up, which was not a Looney Tunes movie, but it came out in mid-March, and then we had a Blu-ray release of that coming out in May of that year. Hell, One Battle After Another was one of those ones that had still pretty much stayed with the traditional theatrical window format of opening in September, and it's not coming out on Blu-ray until January. So, I mean, we kind of live in this world now where it's not just Warner Brothers that's doing this either. Universal's doing this a lot with their films. Sony is doing it with a lot of their films. I think Disney is the only one, and Paramount are the only ones that still release movies 4 to 5 months after the movie comes out. So they still follow the traditional format here, and who knows if that's really going to last forever. But, I mean, it's definitely something to really worry about here. And I would like to think that Ted Sarandos is a much smarter person than this. I think he has to know that people are going to be pissed off about this, and there have been people that are pissed off about this. Not just the traditional Netflix subscriber, not just the regular person out there. A lot of Hollywood people really are not liking this decision overall, like the Directors Guild came out and basically said, we're going to look at this, but we don't like what we're hearing. Christopher Nolan, of course, runs that. The Writers Guild came out with the same type of thing. So did SAG-AFTRA. A lot of these Hollywood companies out there, it's really going to push a lot of people away from going to Warner Brothers if Netflix if they go with the strategy here. But with all that said, though, here's the thing that people took this. I mean, they took this as this like the worst possible option out there for Warner Brothers to go to Netflix, and it's really not. I mean, after all you were hearing about Paramount and what they would do with Warner Brothers, I mean, the fact that they're going to get rid of basically get rid of everybody from CNN because CNN is so critical of the Trump administration. From the fact that there were some rumors going around that James Gunn was not going to be lasting there at DC, which, why would you do that after Superman was such a big hit for you, honestly? And of course, one of Trump's biggest critics is John Oliver, and of course, we saw what happened with Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, so it wouldn't be surprising at all if John Oliver basically would have been gone if Paramount essentially picked up Warner Brothers. But here's another thing that we have to keep in mind about this whole thing in general, and that's the fact that this is not something that's going to happen anytime soon. Like, it's not going to happen within the next 6 months or so. It's not going to move fast like Paramount and Skydance did. This is going to take over a year, and probably longer than that. I mean, it's going to be something where it's going to take a long time for this to get done, and more than likely, it's not going to get done until at the very latest, early 2027 at this point. Like, unless Netflix really has a plan in place to make this happen. But I mean, it's a weird thing going on right now with this deal in general. Like, I think most people can agree that if Warner Brothers was going to sell to anybody, it was going to have to be Universal to be really seen as kind of a genius move, because it's clear that Universal probably would have given the Looney Tunes things like the Looney Tunes and Harry Potter and DC the love that Warner Brothers doesn't seem to really give it in general. I mean, but I will give David Zaslav this. After all the criticisms I gave this guy over the years, I love the fact that essentially he basically trolled Paramount and David Ellison by basically saying, "Screw you, I'm gonna accept the Netflix deal here." Now, that could potentially backfire if they decide to not go with this deal in general here. But I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out in general. And I got to give David Zaslav credit for actually making a pretty good joke about this whole thing, for pretty much making, at least going out in style here, going out like he's burning he's Homer burning the bridge from the nuclear power plant when he quits. Like, he throws the flame over the bridge and it's literally on fire. But I mean, that's how I feel about that situation in general here. But what else should I bring up about this whole thing? So let's kind of wrap up our discussion here, talking about what exactly the pros and cons of this whole thing could be, because we kind of already touched on most of the cons. I mean, we talked about the Netflix backlash against theatrical releases, Hollywood basically turning their noses against Netflix for what they're doing what they're about to do to Warner Brothers. Of course, the whole thing with getting the merger actually done with the Trump administration. What about the pros? What could this actually mean going forward for Warner Brothers and Netflix to merge together? Well, for one thing, I like to think of one of the things I like to think of this pro in general here is that it gives Netflix a chance to do what Warner Brothers couldn't do with a lot of its properties, and give them the proper treatment that they deserve. I mean, we talk about the big one, and that's of course Warner Brothers' a lack of respect for the Looney Tunes franchise over the years, and Tom and Jerry and all these classic cartoons. I mean, the big thing, sending most of them off to streamers like Tubi to be basically kind of pushed off to the side. In fact, they've done none of that actually, and have actually been much more successful for that streaming service in general. I mean, Looney Tunes, I think, is one of the more popular things available on Tubi right now, if I'm not mistaken. But in addition to that, the biggest thing that take away from is that Netflix could give these Looney Tunes properties and all that more time to shine, and actually do more than Warner Brothers could have done under the David Zaslav era. Because it's clear that David Zaslav clearly had a problem with the Looney Tunes characters in general. Like, I don't know if, when he was a kid, a Bugs Bunny character in a Six Flags costume touched him inappropriately or something like that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that could easily be on the good side here, but especially giving these classic cartoon characters who were cartoons that really were not given the proper respect back when under the David Zaslav era a chance to shine under Netflix. I think they can easily do a good job of giving these people overall. I think they can do a good job of giving Netflix can do a good job of giving these characters more of exposure out there, because Netflix is one of the top streamers out there. They can do that with a lot of franchises. I mean, Friday the 13th. They've been trying to get another Friday the 13th movie going for a number of years. So Netflix could finally have a chance to do that without having to worry about, when are we going to get the rights to this, essentially, because they have already got the rights to that. But yeah, it's also going to help Netflix become a major player in the video game industry with the fact that they're also going to acquire the Warner Brothers game studio, so they'll have the rights to stuff from Rocksteady, Avalanche, NetherRealm, TT Games, major franchises like Hogwarts Legacy, Mortal Kombat, the Lego games. The possibilities there are endless of what they can really do here. I mean, there could be a lot of good things that could come from this that we just don't know about yet. It doesn't sound like that at first, but I'm going to be more optimistic about it than most people are right now. I get what people are thinking of here, of the ramifications of what could happen here. And yeah, there could definitely be a lot of things here that could go horribly, horribly wrong with this deal. But with that said, I like to think this is kind of what happened with Disney and Fox. I mean, most people didn't like that Disney bought Fox, but look at what they've done recently. I mean, Disney has been able to explore more with Fox and Fox properties in general. We've gotten a lot of good stuff from them since Disney bought Fox, like the revitalization of both the Alien and Predator franchises. The Simpsons is still going strong after all these years under Disney. Bob's Burgers has been pretty good, and I'll still say it. I still think Star Wars has been better off under Disney. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of good things that can come from this. The biggest thing I'm most worried about is Netflix dropping the theater thing. That's one thing, but also the future of home entertainment in general. Now, Netflix could possibly sell off the Warner Brothers titles to other Blu-ray companies, like they could send them off to Criteria, Arrow Video, these bougie title companies. I mean, it's something that they've been doing now, even to this day. I mean, I just bought an Arrow Video title for a Warner Brothers movie in the Mass not too long ago. Yesterday, actually. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely worries about the future of home entertainment in general, but I mean, I'll give them this. Warner Brothers is putting a lot of stuff out there on home entertainment now. You can get complete series DVD sets and Blu-ray sets of things that I didn't think I could possibly get. I never thought we could get a complete series box set of something like Robot Chicken or the Drew Carey Show or all these different shows out there. They've been more and more recently as of late. So there's definitely a lot of things that could benefit from a Netflix Warner Brothers merger. Yeah, it's not the deal that I think a lot of us were hoping for, but it could always be worse. It could be worse if Paramount had gotten the deal under the new regime there. Comcast would have been the best option overall. I don't think anybody could disagree with me on that. Comcast would have been the best option here, but you can't always get what you want, as the song goes. But like I said, I'm not going to be as it's the end of the world as everybody else is. I have my concerns about it just like everybody else does, but I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to give it a chance. But we have a long way to go before this thing actually gets going in terms of this becoming official. Because, like I said, it's going to take a long time to get this to the finish line, especially with the Trump administration DOJ getting in the way here. And like I said, it's probably not going to get done until late 2026 or early 2027. So we still have a long way to go before this gets done. So we'll definitely wait to see what happens. This will be a big story that, of course, we'll be following from now until pretty much the end of next year, when this whole thing continues to go forward. But yeah, needless to say, it's a very, very interesting scenario, and what a story to come on the week of Steel City Con, when I'm literally try my best to stay awake here, because yeah, it's been a long weekend. We just finished putting everything together from the stuff that we had out there. We finally put everything back. It took longer than usual because one person that usually helps us is sick. So we've been working pretty much since 10 o'clock tonight. The show ended at 5 o'clock today, and it usually takes us about 3 hours at least to get everything out there and back home. But no, it took us 5 hours today, and yeah, it's much. It's definitely a lot. So yeah. I'm just kind of grateful that I was able to get through this whole thing. But I couldn't go a week without talking about this story in general here. But like I said, there were some other stories I wanted to talk about here. But considering that this is the biggest story right now, not just in Hollywood but the world, Netflix potentially picking up Warner Brothers. I mean, of course, it's a pretty big deal overall, and of course, I had to bring it up. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Warner Brothers Netflix deal. I agree that this is probably not a good thing, but I'm going to be more optimistic about it than most people are. I'm going to give it a chance. So, I mean, honestly, there's not really much we can do as a whole. It's just got to be, you got to let the progression of time go through with this whole thing. We got to see how this pans out. And like I said, this will not be the last time we'll talk about this as the year goes on. And I would not be shocked at all if this doesn't get done before the end of the next year, 2027. The start of the next year, I should say, not the end of 2027. The start of 2027, because that's what it's definitely looking like it's going to do at this point. So with all that said, let's go ahead and touch on some. Do we actually have any recommendations this week? We got a couple things, so we'll touch on some quick recommendations. And it is another weekend where it's mostly just catalog titles. I mean, you're getting 4K debuts of some notable things, like Dogma's getting a nice 4K release for the first time ever. So is The Emperor's New Groove for its 25th anniversary. And then you got stuff, catalog titles like Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, Anaconda, The Grey, Awakenings is getting a 4K release for the first time. Jarhead's getting a release for its 20th anniversary. The Blues Brothers is getting a steelbook release. The only big new release I see this weekend, actually there is one thing that I have seen that's actually coming out this weekend, and I'm really kind of curious, optimistic to get my hands on, and that's Has-Been Hotel Season 1, which is coming out on Blu-ray from Amazon Prime, which was a really fun show. It's a really good show overall, and it's coming out on Blu-ray this Tuesday, so I'm definitely looking forward to getting that. But the thing I was talking about before was Good Fortune, which is the movie with Seth Rogen, Aziz Ansari, and Keanu Reeves in it, directed by Aziz Ansari. I wanted to see it, honestly. I saw the trailers for it. It actually looked kind of good, and reviews for it are pretty good. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking this one out. Hopefully, I can find it at a reasonable price overall. I heard a lot of good things about it, so I'm definitely looking forward to checking that one out in general. But other than that, though, that's pretty much all I got for you this week in general in terms of recommendations and all that. Excuse me. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Reviewing Network Live, as we covered the big story this week of the Netflix acquisition of Warner Brothers. We'll see if it gets to the finish line. We got a long way to go for that one, but we'll be back next week with a regular show format and the stories I wanted to cover this week in general here. I just decided to just make it about the Netflix Warner Brothers merger, largely because of what I've been doing this past weekend. So, and it also is the biggest story right now. So. But if you did enjoy this and want to see more videos like it, please go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe button, notification button. Check out the last episode we did and check out our playlist as well. We do the show every Sunday night. And next week we'll have some new stories to cover as well from this past week as well as the week ahead. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching this. I will see you guys next time. So until then, we are out.